Exorcisms, a horrifying practice that involves a religious or spiritual official evicting a demon from an area or a person's body. The events can turn violent as the entities fight to maintain its hold over the host that it has selected, and it's typically an immensely draining process for all of those involved. That's why it's so astounding that young Anneliese Michel underwent an entire 67 Catholic exorcism rites in only 1 year. This is her story. Anneliese Elizabeth Michel, daughter of Anna and Joseph Michel, was born on September 21st, 1952, into a devout Catholic family in Bavaria, West Germany. She had 3 sisters and they would all attend Mass twice every week. By all accounts, she was an incredibly bright and personable young girl who got along with her classmates and did well with her studies. Experiencing a mostly normal childhood, things only took a turn when Anneliese turned 16. She had suffered a seizure for the first time in her life, losing consciousness and exhibiting sporadic convulsions. When she had further episodes, she was referred to a neurologist who had diagnosed her with temporal lobe epilepsy and prescribed her treatment medication. Despite the treatment plan, her struggles continued and her anticonvulsant medication was adjusted as time had progressed. Battling through her seizures, Anneliese completed high school and went on to college, where she began studying to become a teacher. By the time that she had turned 20, her symptoms had expanded beyond seizures. She reported that she was hearing horrible voices whenever she prayed that were telling her that she was damned to hell. At night, she would hear knocking sounds in her bedroom that came from nowhere, an occurrence that her sisters had reported as also hearing. She slowly became more and more averse to religious objects and memorabilia. One day, her mother had caught Anneliese staring at a statue of the Virgin Mary with pure hatred on her face. She had recounted that her eyes had turned a form of jet black, and that it was as if Anneliese had become an entirely different person. Still, adhering to her strict Catholic upbringing, Anneliese went to San Domingo with a family friend who had organized Christian pilgrimages in the past. It was on this trip that her aversion to holy relics and iconography was made very apparent, which was of great concern to her friend. Later recounting their trip, her friend remarked, she was unable to enter the shrine. She approached it with the greatest hesitation, and then said that the soil burned like fire and she simply could not stand it. She then walked around the shrine in a wide arc and tried to approach it from the back. She looked at the people who were kneeling in the area surrounding the little garden, and it seemed to her that while praying, they were gnashing their teeth. She got as far as the edge of the little garden, but then she had to turn back. Coming from the front again, she had to avert her glance from the picture of Christ. She made it several times to the garden, but could not get past it. She also noted that she could no longer look at medals or pictures of saints. They sparkled so immensely that she could not stand it. After losing faith in Anneliese's medical treatment, and on recommendation from their family friend, the Michels began seeking religious advice. A majority of the priests that they had approached declined to intervene, suggesting further professional medical attention for their daughter. However, eventually, a priest named Ernst Alt agreed to examine the girl and help offer religious guidance if it was deemed necessary. And during this time, Anneliese's condition worsened immensely. She began hearing more demonic voices who were now commanding her to perform evil acts. Her behavior became extremely erratic and strange. She would consume spiders and flies in her home, destroy rosaries and crucifixes, and even licked her own urine up from the floor. She was described as having strength far beyond what should have been naturally capable for a girl of her size. She was said to have thrown her sister across the room, as if she were a rag doll. She also squeezed an apple with such great force that it had exploded into chunks all over the room. Upon first seeing Anneliese, Ernst Alt declared that she didn't look like an epileptic, and that he believed she was suffering from demonic possession. Alt and fellow pastor Arnold Renz both suggested that an exorcism be performed. However, they would first need express permission from a bishop in order to carry out the rite. After 2 failed requests to perform an exorcism, Bishop Joseph Stang finally granted the request, but on condition that they maintained total secrecy. On September 24th, 1975, the first exorcism rite was performed. Anneliese immediately exhibited signs of demonic possession, changing her voice, tone, and demeanor once exorcisms began. In an effort to document the severity of the case, Father Renz recorded 42 total audio tapes over the course of their time with the girl. Although they were unable to fully dispose of the demon, Anneliese did have times where she went back to a more well-adjusted and fully functioning person in between exorcisms. These times never lasted long, however. Anneliese wrote Father Alt a letter saying, "I am nothing. Everything about me is vanity. What should I do? I have to improve. You pray for me." And also once told me, "I want to suffer for other people. But this is so cruel." Week in and week out, Anneliese would undergo exorcisms, sometimes multiple per week, often taking up to 4 hours at a time, totaling 67 over the course of a 10-month period. During this time, the priest would ask several questions about who the demon was and its intentions with possessing Anneliese. Supposedly, Anneliese was convinced she had been possessed by several separate demons, including Lucifer, Judas, Nero, Cain, Hitler, and perhaps the most puzzling of them all, a relatively unknown priest from the 16th century named Valentine Fleischmann. Fleischmann was a disgraced Catholic priest that was kicked out of the church for alcoholism and bad behavior. He was also accused of assault and attempted murder. Despite Anneliese having no obvious way of knowing anything about this random soul, she provided accurate information about him and his life, which was a large shock to Father Alt. As time progressed, Anneliese's overall condition degraded. She began exhibiting patterns of self-harm, banging her head against the wall and biting herself and others, to the point where she often needed to be physically restrained. She also started refusing to eat or drink for prolonged periods of time, and began suffering the effects of malnutrition. It is contentious whether she refused to eat because the demon was prohibiting her from doing so, or because she thought fasting would rid her of Satan's influence. Despite this and becoming extremely frail, she was still inordinately strong and difficult to restrain. By June, her physical condition was at an all-time low. Her face had sunken in and she weighed only a bit more than 66 pounds at the age of 23. She had broken the bones and ripped the tendons in her knees from kneeling to pray so often every single day. Despite a worsening state, she habitually refused any and all medical assistance or suggestion. During her final exorcism on June 30th, 1976, she would only mutter the phrase, "Please, absolution," repeatedly. The next morning, her family found her dead, finally succumbing to starvation and dehydration. It was reported that her last words to her mother were, "Mother, I'm afraid." A tragic end to a tragic life. Anneliese's parents and the priest who oversaw the exorcisms would go on to be prosecuted in court for failure to adhere to Anneliese's medical needs. They would be found guilty and sentenced to 6 months in prison. Earlier, I had mentioned audio tapes that were recorded during the exorcism sessions with Anneliese. Due to potential copyright infringement, I can't play them directly in the video, but they're easily accessible on YouTube, and I'll have a link in the description below if you're interested. So, what do you think? Was Anneliese actually possessed by one or even multiple demons? Or was she just an extremely unfortunate soul, plagued with misdiagnosed mental health disorders? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And thank you so much to YouTube user Peter for suggesting this week's topic. If you have a topic that you would like me to cover, I'd love to hear about it. I make sure to read every comment, so thank you for your suggestions. On that note, I appreciate you guys making it all the way to the end here, and I'll see you next week with another video.